Welcome to Learned in Go-Go, the podcast. I am so excited to have Dustin on here with me. Dustin Helsner, thank you.
Hey, Sydnee, how are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. Welcome, everyone, to Learned in Go-Go, the podcast. I am your host, Sydnee, and I am also the author of Everything I Need to Know, I Learned in Go-Go, How a Preacher's Daughter Pole Danced Her Way to Finding Her True Self. And I am super psyched to welcome my friend Dustin Helsner to the show today. Thank you for taking the time.
Of course, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I mean, you're rocking me out at, noon or whatever time of day it is, so I'm very happy.
This is awesome. This is like daytime, totally different vibe. I'm digging it. Awesome. Well, I am so glad that you're here. We are going to discuss my book, and I'm super psyched because I had my friend Steve on the first episode of this season, but you are the first person that I'm going to be talking to about my book who I've met in the last year. So you didn't know me back in the day.
That is true. I did not know you back in the day, though. Based on what I've read, it would have been a very interesting experience if I would have met you back in the day. So I'm just honored to be here, and I'm glad we get to talk about your book.
Awesome. Yes. So for those of you who have not yet picked up a copy of Everything I Need to Know, I Learned in Go-Go, why not? No, I'm just kidding. You can get it at learnedingogo.com, but I want to give you a little bit of background to the book. So I decided that it was 5 or 6 years ago I wanted to write this book because I love telling the stories from that time in my life, because not everybody has that experience, and it's a very unique place to work. But in addition to that, I was brought up in the church. My dad's a minister. So that whole preacher's daughter, like the preacher's daughter,
No idea what you're talking about. So raised Jewish, so I don't know what you're insinuating.
Is the rabbi's daughter? Does that have the same thing?
I don't think it's the same, but I definitely know where you're coming from. I've seen Footloose, so I feel like I know where you're coming with this.
Funny side note of that. They called me Ariel in college, and I had not yet seen Footloose because I wasn't allowed to watch it growing up. So I didn't get the joke until in my 20s when I finally saw the movie. I'm like, that's why they called me Ariel. I thought the Little Mermaid. I'm like, I don't have red hair. I don't understand this.
So, I mean, look, that's a good Disney character. So, you know what? If that's the icon, then you know what? I would go with it. Why not?
Absolutely. I can't pass a big boulder without jumping on it and singing part of that world. I have to do it I'll show you pictures after this,
Please do.
podcast. Please do. But my book consists of some stories from growing up in the church, stories from working in gentlemen's clubs. But on top of that, I tried to share the lessons that I learned through those experiences to have a more positive life and more successful life. And those lessons can be learned, used by anyone. You don't have to be in a thong and heels. If you want to, hey, knock yourself out. But it's not a requirement to use the lessons that I share. So for anyone that's not familiar with the book, that's kind of a very broad description of what the book is about, like growing up in the church, working in gentlemen's clubs, lessons learned, and how sometimes you meet the good people where you think is the bad place, and some bad, we'll put that in quotes, like not so good people in what is conceived to be the good place. It's got a very wicked element to it as well. What you think is the wicked witch might not be. Was that kind of what you took away from it generally?
Yeah, I mean, when I first learned of the book's existence, which was really when you interviewed me for something we were doing for a friend of ours, which we could talk about and promote afterwards. Because
I was gonna say we can plug that too.
I was gonna say, because this is about your book. This is your time. We'll get to Johnny later. So, when I first got it, I thought originally it was going to be more of an autobiography when I first read. So not exact, but I kind of had a feeling of, okay, it's going to be, one day on the farm, it was sunny outside, and my mom knew today I'd enter the world. Like I thought it was being the preacher's daughter, I wasn't allowed any funnel game. Like I
It's
kind of
honest work.
I thought it, like, just based on how you talked about it, was going to be more of an autobiography, because I've also read books of like philosophers and religious figures, and usually the tone is a little different when it goes into like self-help and that sort of thing. So I was very positively surprised. I read the prologue, which I think sets up very well, and then it kind of goes into a little bit of the origin story of how you became a go-go dancer and your relationship in college and a little bit of your backstory. And then it kind of goes into more, yes, a little bit of your history, but it goes more into the different lessons and how it connects to your work experience, which I enjoyed. One thing I'll say from the get-go, because you kind of went to it in regards to good guys and bad guys, is in your prologue, you talk about not kind of stereotyping male customers as kind of these creepy loner serial killers that kind of is portrayed in movies, but you also mention the idea of the women getting the free pass if they're customers. So I actually would love to hear. I mean, obviously, if you buy the book, then you'll learn a lot more. But I think it would be kind of cool. Like, those are two very good examples you bring up in the book, and I'd love you to talk about it a little bit.
Awesome. Absolutely. And I'm going to scroll my website along the bottom. So anybody, if you want to pick up the book, you can go to learnedandgogo.com. And just another quick little plug, if you order a personalized copy, like Dustin did, you also get personalized signing from me. You get a free bookmark, no dog ear pages for you. And you get free shipping in the United States. I learned that lesson early on. And you also get a free compilation playlist of songs I mentioned in the book, songs I used to dance to, and songs that I still dance to when I can work out again. I have an injury right now, so I can't. It's like, it's bad. It's a pole.
It exists. We see
it's
it.
There.
It's there. We know.
It's like out of the top of my head.
Later, it'll be great. So
there you go. Yeah. But anyway, yes. So the women and the free pass. That's what you.
And the kind of stereotype of the men customers, because I think in movies and television, it's always the same idea that it's these, pour on their luck, sleazeballs are really rich. What I like about the book is you kind of make the people that go to these places much more human, which I love. But like, I know in the prologue, those two particular things you want at the very beginning. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts.
Right, because like you said, a lot of the movies and all portray these guys as like sleazeballs or whatever, where I mentioned in the book, most of them want to go have a drink and relax after work and look at something other than the four walls. So it's kind of like going to the art museum, but you can't take the art home with you. It's just entertainment. It's a show. And a lot of the times they just want to have somebody to talk to as well. Like, I know more about a lot of these guys than maybe their best friends do, because they knew, who am I going to tell? You know what I mean? And when you're sitting there fully clothed talking to somebody half naked, it kind of takes your guard down, because at least you got your shirt on.
There you go.
And the women, though, I wouldn't want anybody to have expectations on either side, whatever's between your pants, between your legs and your pants. Like, you shouldn't come in and just assume you can treat another person's body any certain way without asking. And a lot of the times, if a couple comes in, the woman, the first couple times, I had women regulars too. So, the guard comes down after a little bit, but the first couple times you might be nervous. So you're drinking more than usual. And then you're like a lot more handsy because your guard's down. And it's just a respect thing. Like, I've kissed women, and, like, we'll talk about that later, but, there are people that the connection was made, and that's great, but don't just come in and stick your tongue down my throat because I also have a hoo-ha. Like, that's not how it should work,
Well, a number of times in your book, I know you talk about the importance of rules and safety for not you as a professional, but also for the customer as well. But at the same time, you also say, there is a little bit of, depending on where you work at, and I find this with any place, there's always the discretion of whoever owns the place, whoever's working there, that, depending on how gracious the customer was, sometimes it can be a little more permissible, but there has to be a consent to it in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. And, there's always different levels of what someone's going to allow based on their personal boundaries. And, it's a job description. So you can't get on stage in a topless club and be like, well, my boundaries are you don't see my boobs. Well, that's the job, sweetie. Like that's not what I'm talking about. But when, there's girls that would allow more touching than maybe I would because I wasn't comfortable with that. And, it's illegal to do that. But in the back room, in the dark, girls could let things slide. And that's their body, their choice. That's not up to me to say. I just get the guy after and be like, well, so-and-so did this. I'm like, well, I'm not so-and-so. So in that way, it made it harder for someone that wasn't as into that, because then the guy's like, well, then I'll go spend my money there. Well, you do that. Have a nice day. I didn't see you wash your hands. It's not going there.
So one thing that's mentioned early on in the book that I love because I felt like it was very honest was, there's always the classic, well, she's paying her way through college or, she met the wrong person at the wrong time. Your story is very different because in the beginning, it sounds like, oh, this was like some sort of rebellious thing. Preacher's daughter was censored from the world. But that's not what happened. It is because of something a friend of yours said that made you, I don't want to steal it. I want you to say it because I love how honest this was. And I feel like there are people that can relate to this. So what was actually the thing that made you audition to be a go-go dancer?
First of all, I want to say I love having you on my show because you're asking me the questions instead of the other way around. And I'm so into this. Thank you.
No, I told you, back in the day, I used to do interviews. That's a completely different discussion for a different time. So I'm very used to. Plus, this is your book. I feel like it would be weird if you quizzed me on your life story in your own book.
Right. So. But I just love how naturally this is coming about because it's making my part in this so much easier. Thank you. You are the best. Okay. So yes, I do share in the book the origin story of Sydnee. And anybody that's known me since I was, conceived, probably, I'm a smart ass and I will do just about, you gotta watch how you word things, just about anything for a goof. So they would dare me to do all kinds of things. And I'd be like, oh, as long as I wasn't going to get physically maimed, or like arrested, it was like, okay. So it was one of those situations where, and I get more into the details in the book, but I needed a second job. And at the time I had gone from being a gas attendant, because in New Jersey, you are not allowed to pump your own gas. So to a secretary at a stock brokerage. And I was super excited to be making $12,000 a year before taxes. This was before I really understood what things cost.
I always get depressed when I watch old movies and they're like, I made this amount. It's like, oh,
yeah.
Good for you. Good for you.
Goes without saying, I still lived at home because there was no way I could pay rent or eat. So it turned into, where can we go put in job applications? And through a series of events, I found this place. I call it Sun Singers in the book. I had to remember my name for it. So we went in, and it was, again, described more fully in the book, the entire experience of walking in the door and everything.
The book, it's a very good, very detailed. So that's the reason by the book. But go ahead. I interrupted.
No, it's all good. So one of the other main features of this book is my old best friend, Marissa. Because she was a huge part of my life at that point. And she was also a smart ass. So the two of us together was trouble. And she dared me to go dance because I thought they had waitresses. I'd never been in a titty bar. I don't know what goes on in there, but on my soap operas, they all had waitresses.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't that. So yeah, I'm not going to tell the audition story here because it's just so good. You have to read it. I don't want.
But I love that this was like a legitimate, you were like, I dare you to type thing. And that's what made you do it. Because up to that point, you were like, like you were trying to help the friend out, like they were possibly getting the go-go. Then they dared you to do it. And that's what led you to try it. As you said, you should read in the book, but a very comical experience, which then comes back later on for a different experience, which goes very well. But the long and short of it is it worked out where you end up getting the job, though.
Right. Well, that was the thing. I figured I can do it. If I make an ass out of myself, I never have to walk in this club again. And when I got through it, I was like, oh, thank God. And they're like, you're hired. And I'm like, pardon? Did you just see that? Like,
you saw something.
And then, it was, and I talk about this. I don't know if you watch my morning affirmations that I do on my Instagram and my Sydnee page, but I talk about all the time how one choice can completely change the trajectory of your life. It can be meeting someone, it can be a conversation, it can be deciding to go out when you feel like staying in, and then you meet somebody that you just like hit it off with, whether it's a relationship, a business venture, whatever. My decision to accept that dare changed everything.
Yeah.
My job for the next 13 years, the two men that I've been married to, all of that came about because of one decision. So that's kind of like the big picture to all of this is you never know where your life can go if you don't say yes to things, because so many of us live scared and we miss out on opportunities. And like I said yes with the mindset of I make an ass out of myself. I'm never going to see these people again. Who cares? And I quite literally made an, because in Jersey bars were not topless. So it was just your butt sticking out.
There you go. So I am curious. So throughout the book, there's a lot of humor to it. And as you talk about your origin. So first, I would love you to go into why the name Sydnee. And secondly, and you address in the book, but I want to, is there's a certain horror movie that might have made your name very difficult. So I'd love to hear why that particular name / spelling and the experience with a certain horror film franchise that came out that might have made things a little difficult for you.
Awesome. Yeah, I was trying to see if I could find the page real quick. I did. Okay.
It was 40, I believe.
Yep, very good. I was on it. You rock.
So
just because it's easier to
yeah.
Welcome to Sydnee story time. All right, so let's see. I had used another name, which is true, for my first couple weeks. It's more connected to me, but it's not my name that I go by. But I realized quickly that wasn't going to work for me. So I had to come up with my official stripper name, because for those of you listening at home, if you weren't aware, most girls use a fake name when they dance. I did work with girls that, I know it's shocking, right?
Sherry is not her real birth name?
No. Neither is cinnamon and vanilla and
not cinnamon. she knows things that we're going to talk after this.
Absolutely. I used to love the DJ list looked like a recipe some nights, But yeah, I was trying to come up with the name that I wanted to use. I always loved Nikki, Nikki. To me, that was always like a sexy, badass name. Yeah. So of course, every club already had at least one, because that was the most popular one. So when I went in to speak to the shift manager, I said, our conversation sounded like me, Nikki, manager, got one. Me, Brittany, manager, got one. Me, Desdemona, manager, no. And then this girl that I looked at who went by Shawnee, I don't mention that in the book, but she told me I looked like a Cherokee.
Ah, interesting.
I said no, because I don't think that's a good idea when you're not when you're not from a certain culture to appropriate the name is not cool. So I was like, no, thank you. Right. Shawnee was blonde and blue-eyed, by the way. I highly, highly doubt that she. Anyway,
yes,
super nice girl, just not thinking it through.
Right.
After coming up with several other suggestions for a stage name and being turned down over and over, I came up with Sydnee, spelled just like that in a stripper way, which is Sydnee.
Which I like. So
yes. It was a much better fit for me than any of the names the manager had suggested. At that moment, my alter ego was born. So it was really because I kept getting turned down on a bunch of other names. But at this point, Sid, Sydnee, Sidalicious, Sid Vicious, everything I've been called over the last geez, it's going on 30 years, I think is a good fit for me. So it was kind of a, like a lack of them approving other names. But as you said, I was Sydnee before the Scream movies came out because I started working in 1995.
Right.
Soon after the Scream movies came out. And again, can show you pictures later, but when I was younger and had more of that like fuller face, I looked more like Neve Campbell than I do now. So having that look and being Sydnee, I'd get, what's your favorite scary movie, Sydnee? Oh my God. I was like, I was gonna scream. But I love the franchise. So at least if I was going to be referenced as someone from a movie, it was someone that I really liked the character. So, and Sydnee in Scream is not spelled that way.
There you go. I just when I read that part, I was like, oh, right. That makes a lot of sense why that would be a problem. But you go through the book a lot talking about jokes, specifically really in that chapter, and I think the next one. I was a little disappointed that you didn't like, there was a joke about do you like apples? As someone who likes Good Will Hunting, I was very saddened that you didn't like any Apple affiliated jokes. Go ahead.
That's my favorite pickup line.
Oh,
do you like apples? It was my friend couldn't get it straight. Like he could never remember the joke. I have not seen Good Will Hunting. I'm going to hide right now. I've never seen the movie, so I don't know what you mean by that Apple reference. But yes, my friend used to try to say the pickup line. I'm not going to spoil it. It's in the book. And he'd mix it up all the time. I'm like, why can't you keep this straight? It's not that hard. And then when we were younger, like in middle school was when this came about, when I first heard it. And it was my younger brother used to use terrible pickup lines all the time. And his friend tried to do the Apple one, but he asked a girl, do you like broccoli? Let's fuck. I'm like, that's not how it works. That's not a joke.
I like that one though.
Yeah.
It's one of those like so bad it's funny type jokes. So.
Well, that's why I remember it all these years later. I was like, you were going to get yourself into trouble if you say.
Just quickly, and it doesn't spoil the movie at all. Good Will Hunting. There's a famous scene where Matt Damon's character asked this guy who was trying to pick up a girl earlier in the night, do you like apples? He says yes. So then he like shows the phone number of the girl he tried picking up earlier, who he's got the number of, and says, how do you like them apples? So it's a very famous cliche about picking up a girl. So that's why when you make the apple joke, I was like, oh, that must be some sort of connection. But I will admit the Olympics joke that killed you was funny. Do you feel comfortable sharing that one? Or
I think that one needs to be saved for the book because that's so specifically designed for me.
Timed.
Yeah, and there was no way. And I can still picture the guy. I remember his name. I remember he drank Rolling Rock. It was either that or Molson. It was a green beer. But
so what about the music? Because I know you talk a lot about like you got to a point where you could hear any music because some DJs are great, some DJs are terrible. You dance to Chocolate Salty Balls, which as a South Park fan, I did it. But I'd love to hear not only some of the songs that you liked, but also, I think a lot of people, especially in this type of work, make misconceptions like, oh, you go on the stage, you show your boobs, and there's nothing to it, where you really had to work. Like this was a full, real professional job that you had to know your steps. You had to do your polling, of course. So we'd love to hear kind of a little bit of your regimen for preparation.
Well, that's another thing too. It depends, on how long you've been working, what interests you have in performing, because as I say in the book too, there were girls that would just get up and walk back and forth on the stage.
Right.
And to me, I'm like, you have to be bored because I'm bored watching you. There's nothing this isn't the Victoria's Secret, runway show. This is you and your Kmart undies and we're all bored. But then there were other girls who I still would aspire to be able to do the pole work and stuff. There's a woman I follow on Instagram that is just fan-freaking-tastic, and she's my hero. And at this point in my life, I want to take classes with her. I wish she lived closer. I have about 7 moves I've had this entire time.
That's pretty good.
Actually, I think I added an 8th recently. I did figure out a new move.
Very nice.
But for me, I had my routine down, which pretty much works with any song in any genre. You can tweak it to do that. And because I'm a rock chick, you know, like primarily hair bands, love them, rock and roll, you know. So that was mostly my type of music. And then I would branch out into other things as well. But there were girls that did, you know, hip hop and rap and all. And depending who you were next to in the rotation, you'd have to dance to their music too.
Right.
So you couldn't just have your own style for your own music. You'd have to make it work to everybody's stuff too. Right. Hence that one girl that played My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion. And I was like,
yeah, that's a killer.
What?
Right.
And then I get yelled at for doing ballet. What else am I supposed to do to that song?
Hard metal. Just, you know, say completely, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to go the opposite route, wake everyone the hell up. So
exactly. And then depending on the year too, because there was a time, and I discussed this in the book, I had custom made bangs. So I did, you know, a lot of typo. I did that anyway, but like Concrete Blonde, Bloodletting, or whatever by Butthole Surfers from the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack, you know, stuff that had a little more creepy to it because that was my style back then. But then, you know, at the end of the night, the DJs would play Chocolate Salty Balls, or they would play the guy from American Idol, the Asian guy.
Oh, William Hung.
Yeah, they'd play William Hung, like stuff like that to try and get people to leave. But then we'd get stuck giving couch dances to these songs, which was funny. But depending on my mood too, because I would do, there was a time first song of the night was Dead Bodies Everywhere by Korn. That grabbed everyone's attention as soon as I came out. If I started working at a new club, I would play This Is the New Shit by Marilyn Manson, because it starts out, are you motherfuckers ready for the new shit? And I'd be like, here she is, you know, like stuff.
Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that.
And there was another Korn song whose title is a word we don't say anymore, but if I was mad at a guy, I would look right at him for the part that says, you can suck my dick and fucking like it. And I would just be like, so it was a lot of communicating through the music as well. But I would dance to, like, there were times Duran Duran. There were times there was Samantha Fox. There was, you know, like I'm musically all over the place. So if you get my playlist, you get a variety.
There you go. And where can you get the playlist?
If you order the book from learnedandgogo.com and order the personalized book. You only get the playlist if you order the personalized book.
There you go.
Amazon has no free playlist for you. But I appreciate that too.
I was going to say, I think Amazon will survive, but yeah.
Jeff Bezos isn't worried about it.
He's just upset. He's like, damn it, Sydney, why?
Right. But my number one song, and politics aside, because times change, you know, was always Ba Wada Ba by Kid Rock, because it comes out with him screaming, my name is Kid, and my DJs that loved me would be like, her name is Sid, you know, and I was like, it's kind of like wrestling in a way.
Yeah.
If you do it right, if you come up on the stage and you're hyping everybody up, like, come on, you know, then they pay more attention to you.
No, there was a very random side note, but in the movie Megamind, there's a very good scene where it's like a villain and another villain, and the other villain is coming out. He says, you know, you're pretty good, but you're not a true villain. And he's like, well, what makes you a true villain? And it's like a rock anthem. And he's like, the entrance. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of true. If you're a villain or a hero, you need that good entrance. So whether it's rock and music or your outfit, whatever it is, you need to be able to start strong, whatever it is.
And one thing that I always tried to do was make eye contact with everybody while I was performing, because then they're more likely to pay attention, you know, and if you can get them to start throwing money as opposed to just walking around for tips, that was always cool too, because A, more money, obviously, but B, it's kind of like a little break, because now you're not dancing because you're like a basketball hoop, you know, your bottom's like, here you go, 2 points, you know. And then if they miss, it's like, I'll try again, you know.
You alluded to it a little bit earlier, but your relationship with the other female go-go dancers. You talk a little bit about how sometimes, I won't say for the camera, but more of like for the show and for the entertainment, also for tips. Sometimes you guys would be a bit touchy feel. I'm not sure if that's the right terminology, but like touchy feely with each other. With also your, you mentioned your bisexuality. So I'm curious, kind of, was that something that you talked about ahead of time? Was it something in the heat of the moment? Was like, I guess I'm curious, like, was there kind of a line between you doing it because of a certain night where you need to pick up, or you had an interest in the person? Like, what was I guess the thinking process for you for when you would do those type of actions?
I'm not sure that there was a thinking process.
There you go. But that's an answer.
Yeah,
That's an
it was
answer.
because, like, in every group of people, especially groups of females, there's going to be the ones you get along with, and then there's the drama, and then like it's the way it is since middle school, and nowadays even in elementary school, like what my daughter's dealt with. I'm like, already we're in kindergarten. This is usually like 7th grade. But there would be, either girls I found attractive that I knew were straight or not even interested in gay for pay. So I would not even try it because that would be disrespectful. But then I'd have other friends, and the same thing, like, don't come up and just grab me, like, if I'm not giving you the feeling that that's okay. You kind of have to like pick up on people's energy. But there's a couple stories in the book about girls that I did have fun with multiple times on stage. So I'll leave the details in the book. But that was people that I was either friends with or had given me kind of like the, like, you want to, yeah, okay. Like you kind of have that little like side eye thing. And if you go up and you go like that and they go like, okay, I misread you. Sorry. Like you don't just start in with, you kind of have to, foreplay is important.
Yes. So that's I feel like there should be a rainbow going. Foreplay is important. So
Exactly.
just so but
It's like imagination, but foreplay.
we've had this, again. So Sydnee is prolific. She does a number of different podcasts and a number of different shows, which is amazing. If you don't follow her stuff, you really should. But one thing I know we have had this discussion about this was the importance of the mental component over just the physical act itself, and how that leads to it, how it can entice it. You could have different bodies and different features and different things, but if you don't have the psychological, the touching, the anticipation, then a lot of it is well for naught in a lot of cases. So which I do love that you, in the book, especially more the second half, you go into the life advice, like you mentioned earlier about one decision can change everything. You talk about personal safety, which is great. You only do what you're comfortable with. You do talk, and because you mentioned your two husbands earlier, you talk a little bit about the sexuality and the mind. You mentioned which I feel like this comes up at certain points in certain relationships where, are you thinking of someone else when we're being intimate, like a celebrity or someone else? I don't want to say exactly what you said, but, sample the buffet. And this was on page, in case you were curious, 231 to 233. But, if you can talk a little bit about kind of that thought of it, because even when someone going into a go-go place, some people would say, well, that's cheating because they're seeing another person's body. But you have a very interesting viewpoint on it, which I think is interesting.
Right, because I know I'm like looking at the pages specifically, and I love that you have that, because I know we've talked about this before. It took me 4 years to write this book. And in that time, I could have told you where every comma and period was in this. But 2 years later, it's like sometimes the specifics, I'm like, I just need a little reminder, because like I know what happened, but I don't know exactly how I communicated it, because obviously names have been changed, like, so I don't want to like out somebody that I called something else, that's why I'm like, let me just make sure I'm saying this the right way. Yeah. But yeah, I know specifically with the cheating by going into the bar. My thoughts, I don't know if I say this specifically in the book, but how I conduct my own life and my own relationship is if the thought of my husband doing it would upset me, I'm not going to do it. That's my personal line.
Yeah.
So to me, like, I'm not an idiot. Like, there's close to 8 billion people on this planet. He finds other women attractive. Like, I want him to think I'm the hottest fucking chick on the entire planet.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he's not going to be walking down the street and be like, oh, she's cute. Like that's being a human being.
Right.
And if you stress yourself out trying to be the only person that your significant other ever thinks about, you're going to go insane, because it's not like in our makeup as human beings to do that. You can look, like I said, you can read the menu anywhere. You just got to eat at home. Like, I don't care where you're checking out the menu. Just don't go eating out. But I'll bump. Unless you're home. So that's what I talk about in the book, is it's everyone's personal boundaries in their relationship. But, the other side of him finding other people attract, like, okay, we were watching Agatha All Along the other night.
Yeah.
And he's like, there's something about her. And I'm like, I know. He's like, no, I mean, it's hot. I'm like, I know. Like, so we can, so we had that conversation, like, kind of thing. But if we're, in bed, and you think about Agatha, don't call me Agatha. Like, right. Unless we decided that was going to be fun beforehand. I don't want to know. I don't want to know, but I know it happens. Right. And I'm fine with that. Like, your mind can go to something else. That's fine. Just don't announce it while we're in flagrante delicto, as they say in Clue. But, that's basically life in general. If you respect other people, if you have boundaries, if you communicate, so much shit can be avoided by just following those simple steps. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with going out and sampling the buffet if you have not told someone else that they're your only one.
Right.
If you want to go out and sample the buffet, be a single person or have someone that's cool with it. But make sure all of the ingredients of the buffet know that they're not the only one either.
Right.
It's just communication, honesty, expectations. You have to let them out there.
But you also, I mean, you bring it out in the book, and I think it is a section I really enjoy, because you just make it very black and white. Like, this is my personal view on it, and this is why. You also mentioned, though, the importance of, before getting involved, are you the type of person that's going to get emotionally attached? Are you do you know enough about yourself where before you jump the ledge, you know what you are doing and feel confident? Because, there's, in the heat of the moment, you're not thinking about that, but it's when you think it through, then you're able to decide, are the potential consequences worth it? Are they really consequences, or just, my way of getting out of something bigger potentially? But kind of the importance of knowing yourself, which is reiterated a couple of times in the book, is such a vital thing before you do certain things.
Right. And not only just knowing yourself, but being able to communicate that to the other people involved too, because like you said, sometimes in the heat of the moment, it seems like a good idea. And if somebody else is like, well, I thought you told me that, it could kind of bring you back to it. I know so many people who have decided to have an open relationship and then someone falls out. Right. Like when you open it up, somebody might fall out. So you have to make sure you can live with that if that's what happens. Nobody goes into it thinking that, just like nobody goes into a marriage thinking that they're going to get divorced. Like it's not how you enter step one. But if you know that if your husband's in the grocery line and you catch him looking at somebody out of the corner of their eye, you want to kick his ass. Yeah. A threesome is not for you, ever. If he can't even eyeball somebody, it's not your jam, And if your man has absolutely not even a twinge of bisexual in him, there's no way that you're going to have a 2-guy girl threesome. Like, it's just, you need to know the players, how they feel, their own emotions and mental makeup before you do anything physical like that, because hurt runs deep. Yeah. And you get over anger a lot easier than you get over hurt. So something that's that intimate and that, life-changing in a lot of ways, because it can make you look at your partner in a different way. Like there's a lot to it. It's not, oh, I saw this on a movie, you want to do it? Because on the movie, when the movie's done, you're done your popcorn, you go home. When that's done, it's in your brain.
Well, I'm very disappointed that people are not exactly the same as they are in pornos, and that everything doesn't go the exact way, and the music doesn't play in that. I'm very shocked and surprised that life is not just like that in a movie scene. So.
No, you don't like knock everything off of the table at home, and then all of a sudden, bounce, chicka, bounce, bounce, starts playing. That's not your.
I assume everything magically gets picked up afterwards, because if you go to the next scene, it looks like nothing happened. So I assumed it was magic, but.
Now, see,
I'm the right name. I'm learning a lot of very disheartening things, over this interview. So
I'm more interested in porno maid service right now than I like. Can I hire that?
I would love to see that on the resume. It seems you've been in adult. No. Cleaning. I was not a porno. I cleaned for a porno set. There's a difference.
That could be really messy though.
Like, I'm just saying, I could see some interesting job applications, not as the star, but some of the background stuff. Look, if you see that scene, that lighting is amazing. Wait, what lighting? God damn it, this is the 5th time. So I could see certain jobs where you could have a lot of fun with the resume.
I was just thinking of Clerks, where he's like, do you know what the average jizz mupper makes?
Yes. I love Clerks Kevin Smith. So
yeah.
I did want to touch upon, and you've seen the memes, is, people saying how thank God they did certain things when phones couldn't take pictures and you didn't have the internet the way it was. You mentioned it a couple times with your creativity and social media and music, but you give, I think, very good advice on like online debates and, how people respond and react. So I'm curious, number one, if you decided to make a comeback and do this today, would you, or as someone who's married, you mentioned your kids earlier, like, would you do that today with so much video recording and editing and dubbing? And just secondly, what advice would you give to someone who's active online?
Would I go back to dancing? Is that what you were asking? Yeah, because that's a hard no, because my husband asked me nicely not to.
There you go.
Which is different than telling me what to do. So sure. I'm respecting that. That being said, if I was not with him, if we never got together and I did decide to go back, it's hard to know. I would need to know what clubs enforce the phone rule. Because like we said before, there's rules and then there's enforced rules. They aren't always one and the same. I was at a club last year. I was there and I was selling my book and signing my book. It was a lot of fun. Nice. It was the first time I was in a gentleman's club during opening hours, like in years. And it was really kind of like, I forgot about, the links, and it was really fun. Cool. But I went to take a selfie with my friend and they immediately were like, no, you got to face that. You can't, it looked like I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about it, because in this day and age, we're constantly taking pictures. And the thing is, even back when I worked, because in December, it'll be 17 years since I hung up the heels, I think. Wow. And my last day working, because it was December 22nd, 2008. It was the Christmas party. And there was a guy in there taking pictures of the party, and I didn't realize he was taking pictures of me topless on stage. So even back then, and I'm just like, I didn't tell you that was okay. Why would you do that? Kind of thing. So there was a guy that took pictures off of my MySpace, if you you remember MySpace. I had this red dress I used to wear all the time. Still have it, actually. Nice. And he had it in his phone. He took a picture, I guess, of my MySpace and was telling everyone I was his girlfriend.
I mean, sadly, there are plenty of men that do that, so I'm not surprised, but it's still always disheartening when you hear it.
Right. So even back then, it wasn't completely not going on, but I think about the girls now and like what an invasion of privacy it must be if these, guys are in there taking pictures and sharing them with God knows who. My kids are all adults now. they know what I did. You know, like
There's no
we
secret.
have open communication about everything. Like we've talked about all kinds of things. So that aspect of it 10 years ago was huge to me. Now isn't an issue because they're adults. And my family's they just kind of shake their head at this point. So they'd be like, of course you wound up on the internet like that. Why wouldn't you? But it is kind of like, you know, when I put pictures of myself on the internet, it's in my lighting and my angle and my, you know, like you don't want to be put on the internet looking like, you know, I don't even know what, like a busted can of biscuits because somebody took it, you know, up your nose. So
Do you, well, I guess even just for today, because as I mentioned, you do a number of different podcasts and things, and obviously, you know, I love the picture on the cover of the book of you on the pole, but I'm sure there have been times where even though, you know, you're married, you know, you've had some solicitations or some unwanted DMs or things like that. I'm curious if you have any advice for best, if any, response to give. This is a very weird segue, but I think it was 263. You talk about, you know, when men overshare their genitalia and
I knew that's what you were going to say.
Well, it was, again, I had to figure out the best way to put it as a segue if I was going to use it. But I am genuinely curious because that's a problem that happens ad nauseum all the time for women. They could just put a beautiful, friendly photo, and somehow some person will find a perverted way to say, "Hey, I like fishing too," or "Hey, so you got kids? I got kids." Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's always some weird way that it gets spun. So,
like, hey, mother, one another, you know. So,
right?
like, God, yeah.
But I would love to hear, you know, is your advice to engage, not engage, block? Like, what has been your experience?
Well, first, I want to give a shout out to Gareth Southwell. That is the cover artist of my book. He is a fantastic human, and I'm so grateful for him because he went above and beyond.
Beautiful.
Cover artist types that are super wonderful human. You can find him on readsy.com. You can hire him to edit your book, should you ever publish one. But anyway, with me, it kind of, again, like I'm very, the decisions I make can vary based on the day, my mood, my energy. You know, safety reasons, it's always best to just block and ignore because once you start communicating, some people see that as an invitation.
Right.
So even if you tell somebody to fuck off, you're engaging.
Right.
So from a safety standpoint, because as much as we like to think that we're safe in our little houses and anybody's findable, and there's some crazy freaking people out there. So from, you know, making sure you're not opening up to anything. That being said, some days I'm feeling saucy. So, right. So when I get, you know, and that's the thing, like, who doesn't like compliments? You know, so like I got a message the other day that was like, "Hey, beautiful," you know, and I'm like, "Oh, that's nice." I'm like, "Hi," and then it turns into, because I was like, "Hi, thanks," you know, and I'm not flirting. I'm saying thank you for the compliment, but then all of a sudden it turns into this whole thing, and I'm just like, that's not where I was going with it, you know, like I was just being a nice person. And then it can turn into when they get aggressive. Not to give away too much in the book, because this was one of my favorite things I ever said to somebody. But I'm going to say it because it's freaking funny. Was I had guys used to whip it out in the couch dance room, you know, because they would want you to go, ah, or, you know, like, hey, you know, I don't know what they thought was going to happen. It's kind of like when guys honk at you when they're driving by. Like, do they think we're going to jump after their bumper?
But I recognize that people do it. So
yeah, it's like, I'm going to grab your bumper and go, stop, you're the man of my dreams. Like, what, you know, but I'm just like, hey, thanks, you know, like compliment, I'll take it, whatever. So that would happen. And rather than giving them the response that, you know, they were looking for, I would either point and cackle, which it went, or I'd go, oh my God, I never saw an innie before. and that would kind of put an end to it as well. And there's more examples in the book.
Yes, there is. So,
but I always like to try and take it from a different angle they're not expecting, because that gives that pause that I can walk away because they didn't see it coming. Yeah.
It's always fascinated me, like in a negative way, sadly, that people who's like, hey, I should send them a picture of my private area without asking first, or hey, I should make this comment and just assume something positive is going to happen. I think it's, as you said, it's the idea of almost like the realism of porno comedies. We could easily go down the playlist of movies that had very negative connotations of what dating is like and what consent is in the 80s and other eras.
Oh
But
my gosh. Yeah.
yeah, we could, that's the whole show in itself. That's a series in
Just
itself.
real quick on that, as a
Yeah,
parent,
yeah, please.
always rewatch an 80s movie before you're nostalgic and show it to your kids.
That's a wise
Because
idea.
some of them I've totally forgot major parts of. But yeah, back to the sending pics online and stuff like that. I love the meme of I think it's Maggie Smith, and she's like, I think there's a couple of them, because one is like, religion is like a penis. I know you're proud of it, but if you wave it in my face, we're gonna have a problem. Like there's that one.
Yeah.
And there's like dick pics, or like a cat that brings you a dead mouse. Like I can see you're excited about it, but I'm not touching it. Yeah, I like those.
Yeah.
Another thing I like is, because porn is so prevalent
Yeah.
online, you can take a screenshot of a penis
Yeah.
and send it back.
Right.
And that kind of gets them to stop talking to you.
Right. So once it's like, hey, now you sent this to me, I have it now. I was like, oh, you're not just gonna delete it, or like it.
Oh
like,
no, I mean, send somebody else's and be like, oh, here's mine.
oh, there you go. There you go. So I am jealous, because I feel like there would be at least one person that would look at it for a little too long and be like, that doesn't match you.
Yeah. Right.
Like, just really think about it and then be like, oh, this was a joke. She doesn't.
Right. You're overthinking the situation. I'm nicely telling you to go away.
So, in your book, we've highlighted some of your experiences. We highlighted some of the messages you're saying. I don't want to do chapter by chapter, especially since we want people to actually read the book,
Yes,
which you
please.
should. And the link is downstairs, is on the purple area. So please check it out. But I would be curious if there's something we haven't touched upon that might be a lesson or a message that you think people should hear, regardless if they get the book or not. They should get the book, but like, if there's an important message that maybe we didn't touch on in going over the book.
Well, it's funny, since writing the book,
yeah,
and because I have my podcast, my first interview was with I can't pronounce her name, Artemisia Divine. It's like a hard name to pronounce. And she's a sex worker in Australia. After talking to her, I've kind of tweaked my brain on the whole, like, I've always been very, having problems with words here, positive, sex positive, sex worker positive. She made me even more so. And I really think that the laws need to be changed, because I was listening to another podcast that was a friend of hers that she directed me to, whose name is escaping me right now. And they were talking about sex work, and they're like, they call it selling your body. And I think I use that term in my book, and I would love to go back and use a different term, because they're like, how is that any different than a football player using their body to make money? And I'm like, I never thought about it that way, because as long as it's consensual, why, who is, who's it hurt? Tax the shit out of it. You know what I mean? Like, and just make it like any other job where we all pay taxes. We all, like, kind of thing.
But the beauty of it, and again, if I'm taking away what we were about to say, I apologize, but the beauty of having legalization and legal laws and requirements is you have protections. I mean, there are so many horror stories of women sex workers going to police or others, and they do not be believed because of their profession, or they do not have enforcement rights because it is an illegal practice. Whereas if you have something legalized, there are the checks and balances in theory, and you wouldn't have sadly, people do bad things no matter what happens, but you wouldn't have the type of sex work that is today, and the slave trade and a lot of other terrible things, if there was more understanding, legalization, and processes of justice for people to go through. So those are some of the advantages.
Right. It's like Hacienda County or wherever they have the brothels, like, it's more regulated, so it's safer for the workers. And I think that, it's 2024. Let's stop trying to act like Well, then my husband's going. He's already going. I hate to tell you, like, if you're going to
Once
pay
he
for
finds
sex,
out.
you're already doing it. Like, you know. So, and that sounds like a marriage problem, not a hooker problem, you know. But it's, you know, that's one thing I would have gone back and worded differently now that, and that's something that I think is a good lesson again in general is be teachable. We
Yeah.
don't all know everything. And even in the last couple of years since this has been published, I've learned new takes on things. I've, you know, don't be afraid to evolve. You know, opening your mind is not going to make your brain fall out. It's just going to make you have more experiences to touch upon and more data to decide how you feel about things, because so many people are so reactionary that you see one thing and that's it, and you get no other information about it. So make sure you're getting as much info about something as you can before forming your opinion on it.
Fantastic. So before we, I feel like we're getting to the natural progression of
Yeah,
things.
yeah. No, like I said, I love this. I love that you're fantastic.
I am curious because you alluded to it, and if not, then it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Do you actually have older pictures of when you were in Go-Go? Because you kind of insinuated earlier you might have some set up in case.
I do. I don't think I uploaded them for the show, and now I'm kind of wishing that I did. I don't have many
Okay.
because again, it was, you know, it was film camera era. But oh, that's how old I am. And you'd have to take it to the store and wait for a week and then come back and find out you had no good pictures. I do have some, and I also have posted on my Sydnee author page. There was a magazine that I mentioned in the book. I think I call it Undressed in the book. That's, you know, another pseudonym.
There you go.
So I've posted a couple of the pictures from that because they were good pictures, and I'm sure I still have several copies of the magazine. I'm flipping through my phone real quick because I know I put them in my phone, but I don't know where because I take way too many pictures. But if you go to the Sydnee author page, there are some old photos on there. I believe they might be on my Learned and Go-Go Instagram as well. But it's Sydnee Author is the Facebook page. That's my personal profile. And then Sydnee is the page where I do my personal affirmations and a daily funny because I like to laugh. So come on and get your silly giggle for the day.
I was under the impression you didn't like humor. So
I'm very serious.
Totally. So yeah, I was gonna say that this definitely shows that you have no, you know, I really, to be honest, I really enjoyed the book. I think it was very funny. I thought it had a lot of good messages at the end. I certainly learned a lot about you and felt like I got an insight, at least a dip into the go-go industry. Me as an individual, I've only been to a strip club once, which isn't the same thing, but I've been once, and it was an interesting experience. I felt like with this, it was a much more like, these are behind the scenes. This is what actually happens. We're not as like, it was just a very interesting, entertaining book. So I personally would recommend anyone who would be interested to go to learningogo.com, which we've been showing, I think, most of this interview.
Yeah, I just kept it going.
Good. And, Sydnee, it has been such a pleasure and honor to be on your show and to learn not only about the book, but also some of the behind the scenes stuff that I wouldn't have gotten to know without speaking with you. So,
well, I was going to ask, did the book give you any unanswered questions? Did you have anything that you kind of were still wondering after reading the book?
So that's a good question. So, I mean, the joke would be what happened afterwards, but clearly you got a podcast, you're selling the book. And I guess the obvious question would be, why the book?
Well, I actually started writing. I've always been a writer. I've kept a diary since 3rd or 4th grade. I've always just enjoyed writing, which if you go back in time, they are ridiculous, but it's fun to reread who I was back then. So writing's always been something I've loved to do. I've written poetry, and so it was kind of a natural progression that at the time I was still reading a lot more than I do now. I need to get back into that. And it started as a fiction series. And I got through the first couple chapters and I'm like, actually there's so much to share that people could learn from. And so I kind of put it down for like 10 years. And then when my kids got older and I had an opportunity to devote more time to writing, I was like, I'm going to do it and I'm going to make this book. Like, and so at the time I was an active in an MLM where I was coaching people, and personal development was something we do every day. So I was like, in the personal development world, it seemed a natural way to share the stories and help people was a personal development book. So that's how that came around. And then in the time since retiring, since you asked, it's funny because we're going to mention how we met in a minute, but the person who introduced us actually suggested I should write what I've learned since go-go. So I'm like, that's interesting, but it's not as exciting. Because, you know, I love my job. I have a day job that I absolutely adore. I have my podcast. And I am going to start a new book series, but it's going to be a complete 180 from this. So I'm not going to mention it because I want to keep that completely separate.
But something to look forward to.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so what else? Like, if you were talking to somebody who's never been in a go-go bar, do you also agree that they can take away important things from this too? Like, you don't ever have to have been in the go-go industry or...
Yeah, I feel like in a way it's a nice kind of 101, what is a go-go bar, and, you know, what are the do's and don'ts. I mean, it's not like a specific chapter, but as you read through it, you know, hearing your experiences, you know, what was allowed, what wasn't allowed, you know, that I think it also humanizes, which I think for some people going to a go-go bar, they may not want that because they are going in for a very particular reason, and that one-on-one relationship might cause issues. But I think for others to be able to walk in and go, hey, you know, this person practiced this routine and is doing it this way to please the audience, and the tips really do make a difference. Like, I think there were a lot of like almost like etiquette things. While there wasn't a chapter on etiquette, I think there were certain things that if you hadn't been to a go-go, you know, place, then you would now know. But I think it also, the advice you give is very straightforward, which I love. You know, you're talking about, you know, taking chances, the, you know, one thing being comfortable in places, being able to, you know, how sexuality, the fluidity of it in the way that you use it in your professional life, but also in your personal life. So I think there's just also just good, straightforward advice that you can get from the book outside of go-go. But I love how you incorporated it with, well, I did this in my job, which made me learn this lesson. So I think that was done very well in the book.
Excellent. That's what I was hoping for. So I wanted to make sure that was coming across. Like,
the entire interview got that one soundbite, so we're good to go.
Excellent. You've never had to see a boob to get good advice from this book. And that's what's so fun. And again, this is completely from my own experience. It's my own opinions. I know that different areas of the country, the rules are different. You know, every girl has their own experience. This is just mine. So I don't want, you know, anybody coming at me like, well, where I work, that I haven't been where you work. I'm sorry. You know, and this was also in the 90s and 2000s. Like, that's changed too. So, but I think my hope anyway was that I could help people in a way that was entertaining, because some personal development is like watching paint dry. And it's just like, I wanted to have a fun, you know, like entertaining twist. That's why I call it personal development with a spin around the pole. Get it? So, but yes, so just one quick little plug for our friend too, because I met you through a mini series that I'm doing with Johnny Logan Harley called Necro Fiends of the Frozen Dead.
Yep, please.
And I have a picture of your friend.
Yep, that is Turkeyman too. So, very briefly, for those of you who happen to love a company called Trauma Entertainment or those type of films, they do The Toxic Avengers, Sergeant Kabuki Man, NYPD, Nukem High, Poltergeist, Night of the Chicken Dead, those type of just over the top, ridiculous, fun B movies. You can go on Trauma Now, which is free for the first month, and then $4.99 for the next couple, which is really cheap if you look at all the other competitors. But you got a lot of great movies. So there's a character that I do called Turkeyman 2. He's done a bunch of promos for
I love him. He's
I
awesome.
know it's just funny seeing him and seeing the background, be like, oh, my books. So, but it's a little meta. But he's done promos. He's going to be showing up. If you can catch him in Troma's upcoming film, The Power of Positive Murder. He's going to be briefly in a film called Killer Cox, which you can find information on Facebook and YouTube. It's a great film that's going to be coming out soon. And you can catch me on Turkeyman 2. That's like LL lowercase on X, or you can find me on Facebook. I talk about Troma films. I talk about the work that I'm doing. So yeah, if this sounds like your cup of tea on this type of films, then please check out Turkeyman 2.
And definitely check out The Power of Positive Murder, because there's
Great.
some really cool Cretans in it too.
Yes. Johnny did an amazing job. And in the interview that we met, like, he has his own series, like Johnny Necro. You got to Google him. He's done so much amazing work with his music, his comic books, his acting, his directing. He's just an amazing person. And you, as a Cretan in the movie, I'm very excited to see that. The outfit looks, how can you not want to see this movie? That looks so awesome. I'm beyond excited to see the movie.
Yes, I named her Militia
because
it's like, like Malcontent and Morticia, became Militia. And yes, we are the only adult Cretans to ever be in a Troma film, because we all dropped out of Nukem before it exploded. So that's why we survived.
But the fact that you dropped out of that high school says a lot. It kind of says a lot. So,
yeah. And if you don't know what we're talking about, get Troma now. We're not getting paid to say it. We just are both fans.
Wait a minute. People are supposed to get paid for this?
I know, right? Like, I'm missing out, but
no, but it's Troma Now. Like I said, it's an easy app, streaming service. It's completely free for the first month and only $4.99. That's nothing for a lot of amazing films, and they get a lot of licensing from older movies. So you get a lot of different types of films from many different eras. And again, we're not getting paid. I happen to be a fan. If you can see my sign up there, I took some of my other stuff down on purpose, but. But that's the cool thing about you particularly, is you wrote this great book, you had this amazing life experience, and now this new chapter with the podcast and your work with my friend Reaper and some of the other stuff. Like, you just do so many different creative things, which is fantastic.
And that was part of what I touched on earlier with say yes. Say yes to things, because when Johnny asked me to do the series, I said, I'd be happy to, as long as I have no idea what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm like, I'm totally building that plane while I'm flying it. But if you're cool with that, and I think I'm doing an all right job. Like, I'm having a fantastic time, and Johnny's happy with it, so I'm happy with it. But I'm also going to be in his upcoming movie, Cursed of the Ghostwriter, which you are as well.
Yep.
And so is Reaper and Aaron and Lizzie, and so many people in this amazing community of people that I've met in this past year. And I keep saying it's the family I didn't know I needed.
It goes back, and I explained this to my daughter several times, and I've said this to people, and there are much wiser people who say it more eloquently, but there's the biological family, and then there's the family you make. And if you're able, and sometimes that can be many different types of families for different things, but as long as it's something that gives you meaning and value, then that's the important thing. So but no, we've had the pleasure of knowing each other because of those interconnectivities, and we'll, knock on wood, continue to do great projects together ahead of time. So
I was going to say, we just keep adding more to the pile, and I'm loving it. So, and like I said, I am so excited that you joined me today for this. And I appreciate that you were just like, all right, let's go, and made my job so easy. I appreciate that. And yes, everybody go follow Turkeyman 2, and definitely give Dustin love. He is awesome. And like I always like to say, when the tide comes in, all ships rise. So we all just need to be there for each other, because that's the way that awesome things get done, especially when you don't have gigantic Hollywood budgets.
That's true.
Or New York Times best-selling book money. We just, it's all good. But thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And as I always say, when life brings you problems, you need to take them head on, because when you stick your head in the sand, you think you're hiding from the world,
Yeah, man.
but everybody just sees a big ass. Love ya.